window with funding consequences.
I'm in there. Oh, with the funding.
Yeah, what kind?
Good evening, everybody. I would like to thank you all for coming out this evening in what was warm and then rain and then snow and rain. On behalf of the Millis MBTA Advisory Committee, I would like to welcome you to our first public forum. Just to give you a brief, very brief overview, I'm sure you're all aware that the state has legislated new requirements for all MBTA communities that we do have to establish a certain area for zoning that will allow multi-family residencies by right. As of right now, the town of Millis and vast majority of towns similar to ours only allow multi-family zoning by special permit, which means, in effect, if you want to build more than your single-family home, if you want a multi-family dwelling, you need to come to the planning board and ask for permission. This bylaw, this new law that the state has implemented, will require all MBTA communities to establish a zoning area of a minimum of 50 acres that will allow multifamily dwellings by right, and that could have up to a maximum density of 15 units per acre. So the MBTA Advisory Committee for Millis has begun the process of trying to put together, to go through all of those rules with the MAPC, who is our consultant on this project, and try to put together the bylaws. And our first step is to figure out where the most appropriate location would be for this sort of zoning. We are required to have a minimum of 50 acres that are zoned. It does not have to be all in one location. We can split some of that zoning up, but we do have to have at least one parcel that's at least 25 acres. So that being said, our first public hearing forum tonight is to ask people, pretty much give you a little more information on the new laws and ask you where you think would be a good location for this sort of zoning to be. So to get into some of the more technical issues that are well over my head, I'm going to ask Alexis Smith from MAPC. She's part of one of our consultants, to come up and give you a little more information. Thanks.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Let's see, okay, yes, I'm in the right distance. So I just have to start off by saying this is the most auspicious start to a meeting that I've ever been to because of, I don't know if you can still smell it, but when I walked in, the freshly baked cookies were just like wafting in. So you know it's gonna be a really great night when you enter a room and all you can smell is chocolate chip cookies. So kudos to whoever's behind those. Anyways, my name is Alexis Smith. I am a principal housing planner at MAPC, and I'm gonna give you some of the technical details tonight about what this law requires, what the zoning means, before we ask you what you think and ask you to share your opinions. So just a really quick introductions. I will, oh no, we're gonna get into the introductions in a moment. We'll introduce the project team, and then we're gonna spend probably a little less than 30 minutes just going through the technical details, and then we'll all be mingling around those posters over there, and that will be the fun part of the evening. So really quick, these are the folks from MAPC who are part of the project team. Shout out to John Cruz, who is not able to make it this evening, but who is responsible for a big chunk of the content generated, and who, if you haven't seen him around town already, I'm sure you'll see him at future engagement events. And also Alex Koppelman, who's been really involved in this project. We also have Naji Nunali and Christian Brandt, who you probably met on your way in, and Courtney Lewis. So if you have, at any point tonight, you have technical questions about anything related to zoning, any of the wonky stuff, just find one of us, and we'll be happy to chat your ear off about it. Also, a huge shout out to people who, to the Millis residents who are on the advisory committee. I won't introduce you all, but if you all just want to kind of raise your hand. Oh, they're all in the back right here. So these folks have already been part of a lot of the conversations around this. They are volunteering their time to help guide this process and make sure that where it lands is a good solution for Millis. So if you're curious about like why are we doing this, what's it going to mean for Millis, please reach out to them and when we're having the discussion portion. All right, so MAPC, where myself and my colleagues work. MAPC stands for the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. It is the regional planning agency for Greater Boston, which pretty much just means most of the cities and towns within 495, as you can see right here. We do a lot of different things where we have over 100 folks who work for us, but a lot of what we do, most of what the land use team does, which is some of the folks who are here tonight, is we're essentially consultants whose only clients are the cities and towns in Greater Boston. So we only work for municipalities like yourself. And so we get real deep into Massachusetts policies like this. Let's see, and again, just so you know where we're coming from, the folks here tonight are from our land use and community engagement departments, but we also look at transportation and all sorts of anything a city deals with or a town deals with. We try to help the municipalities in our region, do what they need to do. So, Section 3A zoning. Already there's a lot of different terms and jargon around this. You might hear it called Section 3A, you might hear it called MBTA communities. There's probably a half dozen other different terms for it that I've forgotten about, but it's all referring to the same thing. And that thing is a state law that was passed at this point probably 2 years ago. The state has been planning for how the actual state law and the general laws is one paragraph long, and the state has spent the past 2 years figuring out like, okay, well, what does that one paragraph actually mean, and how are we going to guide towns to put this into action? And what the law requires is that in every community served by the MBTA, and that includes communities that, like yourselves, that don't necessarily have a commuter rail station within town, but are close enough that they can access it, that counts as being served by the MBTA. Every one of those municipalities must have one area of town where multifamily is allowed by right. And we'll get into a little bit more details about what that means in a moment. Again, this is the requirement for all the MBTA communities in the state, but the state has broken all of those municipalities down into different types of cities and towns. What's being required of communities very close in that are served by the T is different from what's being asked of municipalities that are further out, like Millis. Again, multifamily by right, we've said that. And the punchline of all of this is that the zoning for this multifamily zoning must be adopted at town meeting before the end of 2024. That is the state's deadline. So you've got, not just you, most municipalities in Massachusetts fall into the 2024 deadline. I must say kudos to Millis. Millis has been one of the most proactive towns that we've seen just in terms of like getting on top of this. A lot of municipalities are, again, they've still got plenty of time, but a lot of municipalities are just starting to think about like how should we approach this? What do we want to do? And Millis, in your town, applied for funding and for technical assistance like back in the spring. So kudos for really you're giving yourselves the amount of time and space that it needs to be super thoughtful about what you want this district to look like. Okay, just kind of more of the same. You can see all these, there's four different kinds of four different categorizations of the MBTA communities, and Millis is what's called an adjacent community, which means that there isn't a commuter rail station in town, but one close. Let's see. So why is Massachusetts doing this? There's a lot of different reasons. These are all from from the state's websites or website. I mean, anyone who's looked for housing in the past 10 years knows that prices are getting more expensive. I'm not going to be able to quote the numbers, but the state is growing, is gaining people a lot faster than it's building homes. And so part of this is to try to get the number of homes to catch up with the number of people and the number of households that live here. And it's also to try to diversify the kind of housing that exists in many towns. Like many municipalities in suburban and rural Massachusetts, most homes are single family, and that just means there are fewer options for folks who may not want or need a single family house on a big yard to take care of. And so part of this is not just about building housing to catch up with the number of people, but also building, giving people more options for what kind of housing that they have access to. It's also the focus on public transit is just good planning. It means that instead of building the housing that the state needs in green fields or in forest lands, it's being focused on areas near transit where the people who move there will have options for how to get around. Maybe they want to drive to work, but maybe they want to get on, hop in the commuter rail and go to work, go to work that way, once or twice a week. It's about giving folks options. It's also, in terms of sustainability, looking at multifamily in a concentrated area just saves a lot of resources. And this also is, so those are all the state's goals, and those kind of like the big picture planning goals, but this is also very consistent with goals that Millis has already set out for itself. With this first bullet point, essentially means that households not declining at the same rate as the population, which means that the households in Millis are getting smaller. Whereas, I don't know, I'm not going to quote the exact numbers, but whereas 20 years ago, maybe an average household was 3 people, maybe now it's only 2.5. There's fewer people, families are getting smaller and households are getting smaller, which means that a lot of the big old houses may not be the right fit for some folks anymore. And as it says here, 70% of all homes in Millis are single family. I know that I'm sure you all have heard this before, but my mom lives in north of Boston on a big old single family house on a 1-acre lot, and she loves it, and it was an awesome place to grow up, but she doesn't want to mow a 1-acre lawn anymore. But she also wants to stay in town and be able to see her friends and still go for walks with her neighbors. And so this is the sort of thing where, but she doesn't have any options in town. So this is the idea is that, someone like my mom could still stay in town and be around her friends and not have to leave her community, but also would be able to find the type of housing that meets their needs as her needs change. And again, this has been called out in Millis's master plan, housing production plan, a couple of different plans, which we can get into the wonky details afterwards if you're interested. So local benefits meet housing need. I won't get into that. I've already talked about that. Support the local economy is also a big one. A lot of municipalities are interested in using housing to help with their local businesses. Whenever you talk to our economic development folks at MAPC, one of the things they'll say, one of the most important ways to make sure businesses are thriving are making sure there's people there to patronize the businesses. And having a concentration of folks in a focused area can go a long ways to supporting local businesses. Another kind of, so that's the carrot side of things. The stick side of things is municipalities in Massachusetts must comply with this requirement in order to maintain eligibility for several different state sources. Again, you've got the 2 years to get there, and the town has already achieved interim compliance, so the town has satisfied all of the requirements, like the step-by-step requirements to get there. But this will enable the town to continue accessing a couple of really important funding sources. Y'all are paying taxes to the state already. Make sure you keep being able to access these state funds. So now some of the technical details. Millis this new zoning district, this new area of town, it is required to accommodate up to required to accommodate 750 housing units or 750 homes. That doesn't mean that Millis has to build those, and it certainly doesn't mean that in 1 year from now you're going to wake up and there's going to be 750 new homes. It just means that the zoning, whatever zoning regulations the town chooses to adopt, have to allow for that many units at some point in the future. And it has to be at least 50 acres. We're going to get into understanding what that means in a little bit. And then finally, it has to be a gross density of 15 units per acre. One thing that a lot of smaller towns are thinking about is one thing you can do is split that density up. So say, we want to have a real small area with a focus density, but then have that transition out as we get further out of town to less dense areas. There's a lot of different ways that you can do, allow for multifamily in a way that accommodates Millis's local needs. And actually, building on that, so multifamily means a lot of different things. A lot of times when you think of multifamily, you think of 6 or 7 story buildings that you see in bigger cities, but it can be a lot more than that, and Millis can decide what kind of multifamily it wants as it crafts this zoning district. A lot of what this type of this Section 3A zoning is getting at is what we're calling missing middle housing examples. And the missing middle means that in a lot of places, you either see single family homes or you see 5-story apartment buildings and nothing in between. And a lot of times that what's in between is really great housing, and it's housing that has existed in our towns, that was being built 200 years ago. Like a lot of this stuff you'll see in old town centers. It could be townhouses, it could be some residential above a commercial front or above a shop, a granny unit in the backyard. A lot of this is stuff that we're already familiar with and that you can see around town. And so again, that's one of the things we're going to be asking you about afterwards, but just what kind of multifamily housing makes sense for Millis. A couple things to keep in mind, what things that are not allowed as part of this 3A zoning district. Municipalities can't restrict age. There needs to be, the zoning needs to be be friendly for family friendly and allow for all ages, essentially. The town can't put the zoning district anywhere where there's environmental constraints, so like on wetlands. And kind of by the same token, the town can't put the district on any place that's publicly owned. So on town hall or on the library, on schools or whatever else. Again, the idea behind these latter two just being that they want it to be in places where you can something could theoretically actually get built, and not on a swamp where it's going to, you're going to have to deal with environmental constraints. What you can do, and this is what we're going to start to ask you to think about tonight, is because Millis is an adjacent community and does not have a transit in its borders, the town can put the district wherever it makes the most sense. And that can be in more than one place. You can split it up into different areas if that's what makes the most sense. So we're definitely going to be asking you tonight about, where is that? Where do you think makes the most sense? The town can set development and design standards. So even though multifamily housing has to be allowed by right, that doesn't mean that the town doesn't have control over what's built. It can regulate, it will still, provided that the regulations still allow to achieve up to a gross density of 15 units an acre, the town can regulate height and setbacks. It can set design standards to get at what this traditional town feels that a lot of people want to foster. So there are definitely ways for the town to shape what the new housing looks and feels like. The town can require affordability. That's something to think about. And again, I've mentioned this already, but create different levels of density to transition out if that's something that is the right solution for the town. Really quick, I'm confident that folks are going to have questions about traffic and sewer and infrastructure in schools. Those are all things that the planning team will be looking at, but we'll have answers to those questions later on in the process. We just don't have answers to those yet, but want you to be aware that it's something that we're thinking about. And finally, the ultimate goal is for this to be considered at town meeting. And again, this is a state requirement, but zoning is locally administered, and so any 3A district has to be approved at town meeting in order for it to go into effect. So folks here are in control of what happens, or a town meeting is. So really quick, maybe not really quick, this is Millis's zoning map. What this shows is that most of the area, which you already know, most of the area in town is residential. You can see the puce and yellow and light yellow areas are all residential districts. The light yellow is kind of the smallest, smallest lots, the houses most close to the street, and then it gets, larger lots and houses further back from the street as you move out from the town center. Those pink areas are the commercial areas, and the gray is the industrial area. Just to kind of center yourself around what the town's regulations currently say. And just to give you an idea of the size that we're talking about, this is how big the district is going to be required to be. That pink, light pink parcel is 50 acres. And so ultimately that's the size of the 3A district that will be required. The magenta parcel is 25 acres, so the town could also say we want 2 districts of that size. And one very, very, very huge and important thing to note, these are randomly selected parcels that just happen to be 25 and 50 acres. These are not in any way what's being suggested for any sort of zoning. It is purely to illustrate so that you can see what this looks like in the broader scheme of town. And finally, now we're going to ask you what you think. Just really quick, some of the things that we're going to ask you. We're going to ask folks to show us where they live on the map over there. This is not so we can come bang on your door. It's so that we can make sure that we're hearing from people across town. If everybody here tonight happens to live south of the town center, then we need to step up our efforts and reach out to people north of town center. That's the only reason we're asking for that. And this is a really fun one. Where do you think this a multifamily district makes sense? When you go over to this map where Courtney is standing, the blue areas are areas that are what we're calling excluded. That means that they're wetlands. They're places where you can't build anything anyways, so you can't put a district there. Open space and parks are also shown there. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume you don't want any housing in your public parks. And then finally, the tan area is low-density residential districts. So that means areas where only single-family homes are allowed on pretty large lots. The town could decide that it would like a multifamily district there, but in general, the denser development is happening toward the existing patterns of what's going on in town are more closer to town center, and so we just want to make sure folks are aware of, what exists where in town already. And finally, I'm an architect, so this is wicked fun for me. What kind of housing do you think makes sense in Millis? And this is where the town has a lot of freedom to define what that means. Do you think townhouses make sense? Do you think that small-scale multifamily makes sense? Are you really interested in mixed use and supporting a thriving town center? Do you think that some of these make place in some parts of town and some of these make place in other parts of town? We want to know all of it. So let us know what you think works. And there are a couple different photos of each type up there. If there are some things that you think work and some things don't, please tell us. The more information we hear from you tonight, the better we'll be able to help the town craft something that responds to the direction you'd like to see Millis head in. Oh, and finally, what do you want the 3A district to support? So some people are really taking this and say, like, all right, we want to make sure that this multifamily housing is going to help support our small businesses, or we think the most important thing is for our seniors to be able to have a place to downsize and stay in town. There's a couple of different things that, goals that you might have in addition to the state goals that I mentioned earlier, and we want to hear from you on that as well. And finally, this presentation is being recorded. It's going to be available online. And I forgot to say hello to the folks who are watching remotely on TV. For folks who are watching remotely, please do log on to the website, mapc.ma/Millis3A, to learn more about the project, and to you'll have an opportunity to give the same input that folks are going to give tonight online. Please share with your friends. Even if folks weren't here tonight, we'd still love to hear from them. And so with that, I'm going to encourage folks to head over to the boards. We'll be able to answer any questions. You'll be able to talk to the committee members, and just generally look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thanks so much.
One area that could benefit from and support the shuttle that would run to a T-station, if that's what you...
There's another one that I'm not remembering.
Right. I think that's right. The neighborhood.
And then we've got a few that have been projects that have been proposed to us. That will be.
Oh, yeah.
Last minute interview. They haven't done any public process.
Well, this audience.
She just said mixed use.
Mixed use.
Do you mind?
Oh, no, go right ahead.
We're going to kind of come back together for any questions that folks want to ask that didn't get answered in the discussion. So I will just open it up for questions. And if you do have questions that you think of it tomorrow, in the middle of the night tonight, feel free to come to this website. There'll be contact information there. This is not your only chance to ask questions. Yes.
I have a question about what's considered affordable, and would it be a certain percent, or could it all be theoretically affordable?
That question makes me really happy. The question was about what's considered affordable, and could it all be affordable? What percent? There's a couple of different answers to that. The one answer is that it's up to the town to decide. The town right now, in certain areas of town, requires that 10% of units are affordable, and you could say we want that to apply to our 3A district as well, or we want it to be a higher percentage, or whatever else. So the requirement is up to you all, and hopefully that's something you'll talk about as you kind of hone in on what you want your district to look like. In terms of if you're interested in all affordable, that depends. You can't require that the zoning be entirely affordable, but if that's something the town is interested in, there's a lot of programs and resources out there that can help you encourage affordability. But in general, the town will be limited to what's financially feasible in terms of what level of affordability they require. And the last thing I'll say is, part of the intent of this is that even in a brand new apartment, say 2-bedroom apartment is probably going to be less expensive than a 2,000 square foot home. And so part of the idea behind this legislation is that, even if it's not super, super affordable, it will be a more affordable option than a lot of what exists in the region overall. Yeah.
The description of what affordability is over there sounds different than the 40B definition of what's affordable, which is based on the median income in the entire area.
Yeah. It's so typically I'll ask someone, Bob or someone else, what specific area of town currently has inclusionary? Oh, sorry.
There's no area in Millis.
I'm so sorry. I read the wrong thing. I apologize. I'm pinch hitting for a colleague of mine, and this is me not knowing that is not a reflection on the town and the planning team. So there's not, but the town can say, and what the town would do is say, all right, in this district we are going to require that 10 or 12 or 15% of all new units are affordable to people earning a certain percentage of the median income for the whole region. And so that metric is the same as what they use in 40B, which 40B is a part of our the state's planning law that I'm not going to get into the details on that one because it gets very complicated. But in general, the town could also say we want it to be more affordable than a 40B. So a lot of it is up to you all. Or affordable to folks earning at different income levels. It doesn't have to be the income level that's stipulated by 40B.
Lisa, the question that you were asking about affordability, that's what you'll see on that third one, key housing terms. They refer to it as lowercase affordable housing and uppercase affordable housing, meaning that uppercase A affordable housing is affordable housing 40B, whereas the purpose for this is to, and it's unfortunately that 40B is titled affordable housing. This is more trying to get more affordable options. They don't have to be 40B. We're actually, the planning board is currently looking at writing a 40B affordable housing bylaw for the town, and it will most likely be on a step basis. So if you had under a set number, you wouldn't be required to have a 40B unit or percentage of them, because it's almost impossible for a builder to actually do that and make the money that they need to make. So we'll have a step, like say from 6 to 10 units, you'd have 5%, or 10 to 15 would be 10%, something like that. Those affordable houses are the 40B, what they've listed there as capital A, affordable B. This whole process is, we can include 40B units, which we will most likely do, not whether we do it in this bylaw or just through the bylaw for the whole town. This is to give more options of affordable type housing, whether it's a townhouse or it just, the option right now we have is like small apartments or massive 4 or 5 bedroom homes. So that affordability, that lowercase a, is just trying to fill that gap. I hope that makes sense.
I'll take a stab at this. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Bob Weiss, and I'm the Economic Development and Planning Director of the town. I think it might be best to not even think of the word affordable, and I think what 3A, the MBTA, multifamily housing requirement is about is market housing. Right now we have a lot of single-family housing here in Millis. What this is about really is making one area of town more dense, and that means smaller lots, a few more units on those lots. That reduces basically the land cost of developing a house. And so that's what makes buying into that house for a family is going to be less than it would be to buy into a single family house. Right, so that's something that we're looking at regional wide as well as here in Millis. But we're really talking about market-based housing that will be a little bit easier for families to buy into.
Let's see. Other questions from folks?
Is it possible then to have zoning where you don't allow a developer to tear down a house and build a McMansion?
The question was, is it possible to have zoning where you prohibit developers from tearing down a house and build a McMansion? The short answer is there are tools to do it, but it's difficult.
So the train station that we're all dealing with is in Norfolk.
Yeah.
And over the past 5 to 7 years probably, there has been a huge level of development within a stone's throw of the platform of the station. It's going on as we speak. So the one section that's over in front of the police station, or I don't know what fire station in Norfolk. I don't know how many units are in there, but they're not all one unit, but from a distance, it looks like just one big unit. But they seem to be individual, I don't know if you would call them row houses or what, but it looks like they share yard space and things like that. Now, does anybody know what level, what umbrella those fall under? And now I know right next to the platform is another huge development going in. And it's in Norfolk, which is not an affordable town. And I don't know if this was probably before the 3A concept. Are any of those things grandfathered in? Like, is anything in Millis that's already existing grandfathered in under this 750 units that we're expected to provide zoning for?
Yeah, so I mean, the first question was, and please flag me down if I'm getting this wrong. You mentioned a development that's being built or already built in Norfolk. It sounds like it's like from a distance looks like one house, but has a couple of different entrances with like a shared yard. And so to answer your question, yes, that is the sort of thing that would qualify, that would meet this the multifamily requirement. Again, like I don't know the details. I'm not sure which one you're talking about, but what you described sounds like it would totally be qualify as multifamily, and that's. So if you like that sort of thing, like that's the sort of thing that Millis could say, this is the kind of multifamily housing we want to see here. And the second part of the question was about existing development or stuff that's already been built. And the state requirement only requires towns to create zoning. And just because but it doesn't require anything to actually get built. So the town could be totally compliant, and if it doesn't pencil for developers, then it might be 10 years before something gets built. It might be 5 years before something gets built. The town's responsibility is to just put the regulations in place that would allow it to happen. It's not up to the town to make sure that something does get built. The town just has to make sure the regulations are there so that it could get built if and when a developer decides, like, yeah, I think the market's right. I don't know if there's, in general, but committee members, anyone, please feel free to, you already heard me talk a lot tonight. Please feel free to chime in if anyone else has anything else to add.
I'll just say that even though those regulations are in place to allow for that number to be built, the town still has the power and authority to dictate what that looks like. And that's what we were really trying to get at with this last poster, in terms of what does it look like, what does it feel like, what's the scale of that. And so even though there's a number that the town has to have zoning in place in order to accommodate, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the number of units that will be built, and it also doesn't say that what 750 units has to look like.
So, as part of the zoning for the 750, are we, or the town, or whoever, supposed to, at the same time, say what it looks like? We're only responsible for the zoning, correct?
Yes, the question was whether or not the town has to say what it looks like. The answer is the town is only responsible for the zoning. If the town, a lot of towns feel better about zoning if they can put design guidelines or whatever else in place, but the only thing the town has to do is put the zoning in place. And it sounds like, Bob, it looks like you had something to add to that.
Yeah, well, matter of fact, I have one question, which this touches, and it's more of rhetorical, and I wrote it down because I want to make sure I get it straight. So, this isn't it. But is it? Oh, thank you. Here you go. So, what I asked was, is it possible to locate a more dense housing district near an existing historic district? I was thinking of town center at the time. And keeping the 15 units per acre requirement compatible with traditional New England design. Maybe through the use of design review, form-based codes, which I've been kind of pushing around. But I think that's the question is, okay, 15 units per acre could mean a lot of different things, as we see. So can we have some, in that area, can we have some design requirements that makes it look, puts it on a human scale, on a Millis scale, on a scale that we all like and accept for a neighborhood, as it were? I think we can. I think it's a little complex to put it, have it at the same time that we do that we'd have the 3A. Maybe have the planning board come up with a bylaw, something like that. I didn't want to put too much on the town's plate, because this is a bigger lift than you originally think. So, but it is possible.
Yep, it's possible if
One
the
step
town
at
so
a time.
chooses. It's possible, but not required.
Right, and we can do it one step at a time. And as Alexis mentioned before, you were not going to have 750 units filling up all at once. And so we can have a good study about this and think about what we want to do about design, not just in this district, but in some of the other districts as well.
I just wanted to follow up on that, the question about design. The fact that it's a multifamily unit, a multifamily zone by right, does not take away the town's control of keeping it to look like Millis. For example, McDonald's came in, they needed to update what McDonald's looked like. They came in, they had the right, it's because of the zone, because of their use, they could have that location. They came to the planning board and they said, this is what we want to plant, what we want to build. And we said, no, this is what you're building in Bellingham at the at Walmart. This is not what Millis looks like. So we worked with them. They actually withdrew their ideas, came back a couple months later and said, yes, okay, we can't dictate everything, but we want it to fit. If you notice any new sign that goes in down 109, we don't allow any new internally lit signs on the wall. We want signs that are wooden and that are lit from the ground, that are externally lit, because we don't want it to look like downtown Boston with all the neon signs. So Millis has those things, those controls in our zoning laws, and we have the ability to include those things in this zoning law as well. We can't say you have to ask us permission to build the multifamily because it's by right, but we can put provisions in there that still make them come to the planning board, for example, so that we have some guidance and we can give people guidance and control. So they're not building some very modern, sleek construction in the middle of our little country town.
So I noticed one thing. I actually grew up in the city before I lived in Millis, and I have a pretty good idea of what 1 acre is. And for the life of me, I can't imagine living with 14 more families on that spot of land. I don't know if you have anything that depicts what 15 families on a 1 acre lot is. Is it, a sixplex like a lot of people in Millis came from in their youth, in the Roslindale, Mattapan, Dorchester, Worcester, all those places. That's what I envision as a density of a downtown area And again, even having that in my head, I just can't put 15 families in 1 acre.
Yeah, just so it could, it's so the
30 vehicles.
just so the folks watching from home can hear. I'll just repeat. He's saying, he kind of can picture what an acre looks like, and can't picture how you fit 15 families in an acre, and what does that look like. And I think you already kind of have answered your question. You're spot on with what you were saying about like the sixplexes. Like, yeah, that's exactly the sort of thing that this zoning is looking at. And I think another piece of it is that, like a family with 2 parents and 3 or 4 kids, like, this is probably not going to be the right kind of housing for them. But if, just an older couple who wants to move to a smaller home, or someone who wants to, live close to where they grew up in and then commute into the city, yeah, a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment would be perfect for them. So this isn't this doesn't have to be the type of housing that meets everybody's needs. It's just another option that might be a really good option for some people who have a smaller household than 2 parents, 2 kids, whatever else. Yeah, thank you. No, that's a good question. Sorry, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to add, that also doesn't mean that every acre within that 50 acres will have 15 dwelling units. The zoning just has to allow for that amount of density. It could be 4 units, it could be 6 units, and collectively they add up to several units, but it doesn't necessarily mean that 15 units will be built on every acre within the 3A district.
But there is the potential for that.
And sorry, I'm going to repeat this so that the folks watching from TV can get this. Courtney just said that this doesn't mean that there's going to be 15 units on every single acre. And then, I'm sorry, what was your name? Dawn just said, but there is the potential. And I think there has to be an average potential of 15 units, but the town can also say, like, listen, in this part of town, we really think that only 5 units is appropriate. So we're going to allow 5 here, and then in another area, allow more. The town can say different densities in different areas. It just has to average out to 15. The potential has to average out to 15. I know you, before, I'm going to come to you in 1 second, but I just want to make sure that there isn't anyone else who's been dying to raise their hand and hasn't yet. All right, formulate the question, and then we'll come back to you all who are dying to raise your hand. Sorry.
Can the housing be a combination of rental and condos?
Yes.
I'm assuming that townhouse kind of things are going to be condos, but could there be like a larger, an apartment building that's for rental?
Yeah, the question was, can this be rentals or condos? And it could be either one. The town actually zoning can't say whether or not something is rental or condos. Folks, feel free to shoot your hand up in the next couple of minutes, but again, just as we're winding down, the website is up here. Please encourage folks to visit the website, encourage folks to, all of this, this information will be available online for people to weigh in on. There's a QR code. If you want to just snap a picture and go right to the information online, please share widely. And thank you all so much for being here. I don't know if Bob or if any of the committee members have any closing thoughts. Oh, sorry, yes.
Is there any help for towns to get property owners who have larger lots that would be within whatever zoning we find, to get property owners to buy into this or encourage them to build this kind of housing?
In terms of actually, do you mean like in terms of building things, or just to like come out and talk and like support the adopting the zoning period?
Well, we have some large parcels downtown that have entity. But they're privately owned.
Yep.
So we can't, the town can't make anybody do anything. But is there any help will there be any help through this process from the state or from MAPC to encourage the landowners to actually build some of these housing projects that we hope they will?
Yeah, the question was whether or not there's any assistance to help encourage private landowners to do something. Oh, yes, thanks.
I think it's got to be clear. The goal is not to have the town build these, it's to make it available to be built by the private sector. We're not in the business of building houses. We'll never be in that business. We're not going to encourage landowners to do it. We're going to zone it in an area that makes sense to the town, and that's what we're going to vote on. And the planning board will keep it in a way that looks right for the town. And then if a private developer wants to approach a private landowner, if everything's been encouraged right and the price is right and all those things work out, they'll make a deal. But otherwise, we're done. After we zone it and design, set the planning board set of design criteria, it's a private transaction at that point. So I don't think the town has a role in encouraging either way or discouraging.
So we could zone the Ann and Hope area and not worry about whether there's something built there already.
Correct. Yeah, that's pretty much, looking at the map, the areas that are most likely to be used already have things on it. I don't think anybody on the committee, and I don't want to speak for the entire committee, but we've never talked about finding virgin, unused land in town to build this on. We've talked about overlay districts where there's something there already, like Ann and Hope, to use your example, that came up in conversation. I'm not sure that's the right area, but that's an area that we talked about. You could zone it for this high-density overlay, and then a developer could approach the owner of Ann and Hope, totally independent from the town, and build there if that's the way the town decided to zone it. And we could zone it, and the planning board could dictate a look that they'd like for that area. But that's as far as we go. We're not going to encourage Ann and Hope to sell it. We're not going to do anything beyond that. We're just going to pick where it can be, and then the private parties make the decisions.
Bob or any folks from the committee, any last closing thoughts?
First of all, I'd like folks to know that nothing here is going to happen overnight. I think we've just talked about that. And as it's been said several times, we're not building anything. We are merely putting zoning out somewhere where it's up to the private sector to do this. It will probably happen one parcel at a time, 2 parcels at a time. And we have a process that the town is using, the 3A MBTA Advisory Committee, who's put this on tonight, is going to have regular meetings. We will advance things. We're going to go through a zoning analysis that MAPC is going to do. They're experts at something like that. We'll be taking a look at zoning. We'll be taking a look at densities. We'll be taking a look at traffic patterns. We'll be taking a look at the environmental conditions. There's a long way to go. And that's because of the town meeting that we're looking at will be in the spring of 2024. We still have to go through the planning board, right? So there's a lot of, there's going to be a lot of analysis that's going through. We do want people to keep up. I know a lot of people watched our meetings, the committee's meetings on YouTube and on Millis Community Media. So I know people are paying attention, and hopefully you'll keep following the advisory committee, because that's where a lot of this information is going to happen.
That's only 1 year until the town meeting.
1 year.
That's a lot of work to do in 1 year.
Yeah.
All right, anyone else? Cool. Thank you all so much for being here, and stay tuned.